As Henry Ford famously says, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. And our beliefs shape our lives. And so, what we believe is true about ourselves and what we believe is true about how career advancement works or what's possible in our lives will direct the outcomes in our lives because our belief is at the root of the actions that we take. Before we can change our actions.
Hey friends, it's Mary, and this is the Mary Guirovich Show, a podcast that champions today's working women to gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to uplevel your career while strengthening your faith and living your dream life, all in record time. We'll cover topics like career advancement, leadership, personal development, faith, and health and wellness, so you can intentionally create a career and life full of more abundance, joy, and love. Let's get started.
Hey friends, it's so great to be with each and every one of you again today. As the holiday season continues, I definitely want to get to our goals call, but I'm going to do that in a couple of weeks. An important lesson came up, and God has really put this on my heart. And I just want to share some of the insights and the messages that He's been sharing with me, and some of the things that have happened in the past couple of weeks that have really had an impact on the way I think about things. And some of the lessons I've already known, and some of them were just reminders. But I want to just take time to share these with you today. Now, the title of this episode is Self Belief and its Impact on Our Careers and Life. And self belief, it's one of those things that if we're not careful, we can overlook the importance of self belief. But this is the one thing that I have realized, that our belief in ourselves, it impacts everything in our lives. As Henry Ford famously says, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. And our beliefs shape our lives. And so what we believe is true about ourselves and what we believe is true about how career advancement works or what's possible in our lives will direct the outcomes in our lives because our belief is at the root of the actions that we take. Before we can change our actions and truly do, a lot of times people just try to modify behaviors, but when we just try to change behaviors, it rarely works because behavior change is all done off of willpower. And sure enough, you may do good for a while, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, but something comes up and it changes, right? Because willpower is a force. It's not using like an innate power. And when we think about self-belief, I want to share with you a couple of stories here because this past week, it'll be a few weeks ago now because I always do these in advance for you, so I have time to edit them and get the podcast notes ready and everything. And so today I'm actually prepping for Thanksgiving. So I've had some Thanksgiving prep going on. It's the day before Thanksgiving when I'm recording this one. But I took my son roller skating this week for the first time. So he got roller skates from his uncle for his birthday, and we gave them to him after his football season ended, of course. But we got these roller skates, and he's been, kind of putting them on at the house and just standing up and doing what he can, whether it be on the carpet or on the hardwood. He's just been trying to do them. Well, Tuesdays, they've got this $4 skate in town. So I say, okay, we are going to go roller skating. And so he gets all packed up and he wants his sister to come with him. So his sister Lauren is coming too. And we get to the roller skating rink and we get the shoes put on and I get his laces all tied up properly and we get over to the edge. And what do people normally do at a roller skating rink the first time they're going to roller skate? I don't know. In my head, I'm thinking I'm hanging onto the wall and I'm going to just try to stand up and see how this goes. Well, not Dalton. My son goes right in the middle of everybody and he's skating. Like, he's not holding on to any walls. He fully believes that when he puts these skates on, he's going to be able to go. Now he is prepared for falls. He's wearing elbow pads and knee pads, and he chose to wear these. He packed them up and brought them with him. And he even said, "Mom, nobody else is wearing these pads." And there were a few other kids, but he was one of the few. But he didn't mind wearing them. And I think about this too, because here this kid is, for the first time at a roller skating rink. He is out with everybody else and he is skating. Like, of course, yeah, he's falling down every once in a while, but he is skating. He just like went out there and was skating. And this is what he believes about himself. Like, he knew that he was going to be capable of doing this. He just believed that he would. He knew that he would fall down sometimes, and that was okay. That was part of the process. That's part of the process of learning to skate. And we did talk about that a little bit in the car. Like, when you get there, there's probably going to be kids that are way better than you. Some of these kids are going to be younger than you. They've been skating for a while. And he said, "Mom, you think there's going to be littler kids there than me that can skate really good?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. That will definitely happen. But you can do it too. You'll be able to skate. You have to fall down. Everybody else fell down when they started too." But a lot of times in life, we see other people and they are so far along in their journey. And we're like, "Oh man, we could never do that," right? We just think like that's not possible for us. And we tell ourselves no before anybody else does. So here he was skating. So about 30 minutes after he's skating, he's looking around and he's like, "Where's Lauren?" And Lauren is hanging onto the wall and skating around, and she is literally holding onto the wall with every, skate step, whatever you want to call it, she's taking. And he says, "I'm going to go get Lauren." And he goes over to Lauren, and I'll never forget what happens next. He is encouraging Lauren. He says, "Come on, Lauren. I want you to skate with me." Lauren is Dalton's older sister. She's 23 years old. And she has a couple of special needs. She has autism and something else called dyspraxia. And it is a motor function. You can call it a disability, I guess, but basically it just affects her ability to use her motor skills. So things like even brushing her teeth, doing zippers, tying shoes, it's incredibly difficult for her. And so something like roller skating is definitely a challenge for her. But here Dalton is. He is going over to her and he is like, "Come on, Lauren." And he starts teaching her how to skate and he gets her off the wall. By the end of this, she is now skating around too. Yes, she's falling some, but she is skating and she is not holding on to the wall. And in these moments, I was like, my mind was just blown. And here's why. Because I have only seen Lauren holding on to the wall skating. And Lauren's belief in her head was, "I've got to hold on to the wall and skate." But Dalton, he saw something different. He encouraged her. He believed in her. And so while our self-belief is most important, because Lauren had to have not 100% belief she could skate, but she at least had to have more belief that it was possible for her than impossible, or she would have never let go of that wall. She would have continued to hang on to that wall. But her increase in belief came through her brother's encouragement. Her brother, who did not see her inabilities, but only believed in her and encouraged her. And although he had only started skating that day, he was out there teaching her everything that he knew about skating. And he was an encourager. And because of that, she was skating. And I share this story with you because in a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing your goal settings call. But if you really want to accomplish things, then we have to take time to kind of open up our minds and think about how we're thinking about things, what we are believing is possible for us. And if we're not careful, especially as women, we can do a few things. One, we have a tendency to want to please people. Most of us were raised to think about others and not necessarily ourselves. And while that's great as children and even as adults, right? We should be thinking about others. That's loving, that's caring, but we shouldn't think about others at the detriment of ourselves if it produces bitterness or anger or resentment or any of these things, because we are not a victim in our lives. And I know I used to live that way. I used to like do things and then just be all upset that I had to do them. And if we're not careful, our lives can feel that way. Even the other day when I was taking Dalton roller skating, my day was packed full that Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I started the day with work. I worked all day till about, what was it, 5 o'clock. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I've got to finish the shopping list for Thanksgiving because I'm the cook. I used to work in the restaurant industry and others help me in the kitchen, but I'm really the planner. I'm really the cook. Those are gifts that God has given me. And I enjoy doing those things. I enjoy hosting. So we're having people over for Thanksgiving, which is all a choice. And so busy day working, had worked out in the morning, also taking care of Dalton because Dalton's home while I'm working as well. So lots of different dynamics going on. His dad was out of town working. Now we have to make the shopping list. I said I would take him roller skating. So we go across town, we do the roller skating. I get on roller skates. I think the last time I roller skated was about 10 years ago when my youngest daughter got roller skates. And then we had to hit the store and we had to go to a few stores because there were a few different things that we wanted to get. And by the time we got home, it was after 9 o'clock. And I had been up, I don't know, since 5:30 that morning. But as I was walking back to the car after our last store trip, I just really smiled and I just was grateful. I was grateful to get to have this life, grateful for my children, grateful for my home, grateful that I like to host, that God's given me the ability to cook and plan and all of these types of things. And I just, in our lives, if we're not feeling grateful for something, and I know I've spent so many years, and if I'm not careful, it happens now. I mean, even after I got home that day, we still needed to put the sheets on our bed. And I was like, oh my gosh, our son needed to get put to bed because it was past his bedtime. We had to get the things put away. Looking through stuff, I'm like, we had lost the cream corn. And, that was something my daughter had never had me make before. And I'm like, we don't have the cream corn. So I guess we donated it to the food bank because we left it at the local grocery store. But here I was like, okay, I still get to put my son to bed. And I think that's one of the things is as moms, as women, maybe you're not a mom yet and you're listening to this. Maybe you want to be a mom. Maybe you have no desire to be a mom. And no matter what it is, you can insert mom with anything. It could be friend, it could be, a volunteer for something. But just remembering that the things that we do, they are within our control. They are choices that we are making. And sometimes I think as women, especially, we put too much on our plates. I know I do. And my husband will tell me, he's like, Mary, you're taking on way too much right now. And even if things are good, they add stress to our lives. And so we have to be careful about how many things we're taking on, but we want to make sure that we're still taking on things that light us up. I was reading a article the other day as I was preparing one of the YouTube videos coming up, or one of the emails that are coming up for one of the YouTube videos. And was talking about the fear of public speaking. But as I looked up fears, these things came up. These are the top 10 fears of people. And this is on Inc. magazine, but the top 10 fears that hold people back in life according to a psychotherapist. And I want to read these to you. And she starts the article with saying, whether your fears involve your relationship, career, death, or discomfort, staying inside your comfort zone will ensure you live a small life. In fact, as a therapist, I see a lot of people work so hard to prevent themselves from ever feeling anxious that they actually develop depression. Their efforts to make themselves stay comfortable inadvertently backfire. They live boring, safe lives that are void of the risk and excitement that they need to feel fully alive. Now, as I read that the other day, I just thought, wow, that is so true. We are put here on this earth, but things hold us back. And there's so many things that we don't experience because we don't believe that we're capable. We don't believe that they're available to us. But it all starts with these root beliefs that we have. And I want to read you these top 10 fears that hold people back. Because as you go to set your goals, I want you to make sure that you're setting them out of things that you really truly want and desire, things that you want to contribute here on earth, things that you believe God wants you to contribute here on earth, not making your goals, whether they're small out of fear or maybe they're large out of people pleasing. I know I used to consult with doctors, and we would happen to come upon doctors that it was hard for them to be passionate about what they were doing because they weren't doing it for themselves. They were doing it because their parents wanted them to do it. And so they didn't desire to be a doctor. And so it was incredibly difficult. So we want to make sure we're doing things because they make us happy and because they're things that we want to do. They're things that we're choosing to do, or they're things that God wants us to do. And that's not always easy. There's definitely challenges. We see definitely several people in the Bible where they have career changes, career shifts, and even promotions, right? And they're challenged in those things. It's not always easy. And so we can trust in God and we can lean on God through these fears. And, my prayer for you is that as you go to make your goals for this upcoming year, that they're void of these 10 fears. And so the fears are change, loneliness, failure, rejection, uncertainty, something bad happening, getting hurt, being judged, inadequacy, and loss of freedom. And hearing and reading these 10 fears, it gave me a lot of insights because people are often afraid to approach their boss for advancement. They're often afraid to talk to their boss or their manager about what they really want, what they really need. We're often afraid to say no to a project whenever we know that we really don't have time to put it on our plates. We often don't put ourselves out there for a project because we're not sure if we can do it. And we can make ourselves small if we feed into these fears. So, what I would love for you to do over the next couple of weeks before we get to our goal setting is just to start to brainstorm, start to think about, first of all, if I could pick anything, right? Whether you have the ability or you don't have the ability, what is it that you would want to do? What is it that you'd want to do this upcoming year? It doesn't have to just be in your career, it can be in your life. And when you're setting goals, I think it's important for us to set goals in multiple categories of our life at one time because there has to be a balance. If we're going after some hard goals in our career, those are going to take our time and they're going to take our energy. But we also may have goals for our marriage or for our families or for our community. And those goals are also going to take our time and energy. And so it's really figuring out, how do we balance these goals? So I just want you to start to brainstorm. What has God been putting out in your heart? Maybe pray through this. Ask God, what is it that you have for me? And when he speaks to you, I want you to write it down. Okay. We think we're going to remember things, but often we don't. So write it down because I want you to come back to this list as we go to pick our goals. But just think about the things. Is there something you've been putting off? I know I had thought about a book, but I never really believed I was capable of writing a book previously. And so I put that goal off for a while. It wasn't until I had that belief that I could start writing the book. But if you're having anything where it's like, it's kind of coming up, but it almost gives you a little bit of anxiety because it's like, well, I hate to put this goal down because maybe I can't accomplish it. I want you to write it down anyways, because I'm going to talk to you about goals that you don't know how to accomplish. I'm going to talk to you about goals that maybe you feel are like way too big for you to be able to accomplish, or you're not even sure where to start. But if you're having any self-belief, if there's something like, if you think like, okay, well, I want to advance in my career, right? Because it's interesting. This is one thing I want to share with you before we wrap up today, because God has also kind of expressed this and shared this with me recently. And what it is, each person, we all get 24 hours in a day, every single one of us, and we get to choose what our priorities are. And I think that is so incredibly valuable. And God tells us how to set our priorities. And he also tells us that work is a large part of what we're supposed to do. He gives us one day to rest. He wants us to rest one day. He doesn't want us just working. He wants us to rest because that's showing trust and faith in him. But we are to work. And whether that's inside the home or outside the home, I think he's calling us to work in both areas. And for some, yeah, just inside the home or volunteer work or other work. Work is work. It doesn't matter how much you get paid. You are still equally valuable to the Lord. There is no difference in our value. But what I see as women, because we know that there's some gaps that exist, and what I see what happens is we set limitations up on ourselves. We say, like, well, I don't really want to advance because I'm going to have to get rid of my flexibility if I do that. And we think if we change something that it's going to eliminate, or there's no way that we could get what we want in all areas. It's like that's off limits to us for some reason. We tend to think this, right? I think well-being is incredibly important, flexibility incredibly important, but it's also important for us to understand that advancement itself doesn't have to mean a loss of those things. There's actually ways where we can structure and redesign what it is we're doing. And sometimes it takes us thinking a little bit differently. But the insight I wanted to share with you was we each have these 24 hours in a day. There are people out there that are incredibly successful. They came from nothing, like literally, the rags to riches stories, we hear them, right? They're doing ethical things. And some of those people are working really, really long hours. Some of them are. They're working 100-hour work weeks. Okay, that's not what we want to do. God does not want that for us. That's not what we should be doing. We should not be working 100-hour work weeks. I don't think he would want us even working 90 or 80 or 70-hour work weeks, because there's a lot of work to do for the Lord, and it probably isn't through working that many hours. Now, there may be seasons in our lives where we should be dedicating more time to something, but not at the expense of the other things that God has given us, right? Like our children, they do have to come before our careers. Our husbands, too, they have to come before our careers. And that's not a bad thing, because when we prioritize things, it doesn't mean that we still can't advance. It doesn't mean that we still can't grow in other areas just because we're prioritizing something that's important to us. That's actually when we can use our faith even more to trust that we can actually do less and God can provide more, because that's how he works. We don't work to get. Now, working is part of what we need to do. That's part of what we do in faith. We work, but we don't have to overwork. One of the Proverbs I was actually reading this morning, I'm going through the Proverbs with my Bible study, and today's the 23rd. And it said, don't wear yourself out working, trying to get rich. So that shouldn't be our intention. But we also want to just make sure that we're not thinking that just because we're working means that we have to lose our flexibility, means that we have to sacrifice our family, means that we're not a good parent, means that we're not a good wife, because those things don't have to be true. We can actually be more fulfilled with the work we're doing. Sometimes if we're doing a higher level of work, and we can balance that out. And we're going to talk more about that next week. But I just want you to think about that. There's people out there that are valuing themselves. They have a self-belief that they are more valuable, that their time is more valuable, and that they should be paid more. Now, you may be thinking, well, Mary, that makes them greedy. That makes them, and if you're thinking anything like that, okay, I used to have these thoughts too, right? But we have to just reframe this. There are really good people out there doing very ethical, great work. I think about John Maxwell. He is one of the most amazing leaders that we have. He's the number one leadership authority. He literally goes in and changes other countries. Like, he works with the president, and they put leadership into other countries. Like, it's incredible work that he's doing. He's doing powerful work. But what he is doing is, he values himself. He values his time. And he had to work into that, his time and himself. He wasn't always as valuable as he is today from a worldly standpoint as he was, 40 years ago. He's much more valuable now. His time is much more limited now too. As he's older, his time is much more limited. But he values himself. He values the work that he does. And he focuses only on the work that he can do. And that's the thing. It's the hours that these people that are able to make these incredible livings, what they do is they're focusing on the things that only they can do. They focus on the priorities that are going to get them the maximum result. And so when we're going to set our goals, I want you to think about if you were going to increase your value, what would that mean? How much would you want to increase your value? And what work would be most valuable for you to be doing? And perhaps as we set some goals, one of the goals we need to set is what we're actually going to stop doing in 2023 because it's actually not bringing us any closer to the things that we want to do. All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to talk to you again in just a couple of weeks where we will dive into our goal setting. So for that call, I want you to have taken time to kind of reflect on the past year. Take some time to reflect on what you're believing is capable for you. Take some time to pray and think about what God wants for you in this upcoming year. And then I want you to come to the call with an open mind so we can get your goals set. Even if you've never set goals before, I want you to come because we're going to set goals in a really realistic way, but in a way that encourages you to live out what God really wants for you in this life. So I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, you have a wonderful day. And remember, you're only one plan away from your next promotion. And God, He's not done with you.
Hey friend, thank you for listening today. Be sure to join us next week for another great episode. If you receive value from today's show, I'd appreciate it if you would leave us a 5-star review to help others learn about the show. And if you're ready to fast track your career and increase your income, impact, and joy, then head on over to maryguirovich.com and check out the masterclass that teaches you how you can advance too. I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. This and so much more can be found in the show notes. I look forward to seeing you soon.